Most gardeners fight weeds the hardest possible way. They wait until the weeds become tall, strong, and deeply rooted. Then they bend over for hours, pull until their hands hurt, spray whatever promises fast results, and return a week later to discover that the garden is green with weeds again. It feels as though the weeds are winning. But old farming communities understood something modern gardeners often forget. The easiest weed to remove is not the large weed you can clearly see. It is the tiny weed that has barely broken through the soil. At that stage, the roots are weak, the stem is delicate, and one shallow movement across the soil can destroy hundreds of seedlings in minutes. That is the practical idea behind the so-called old Amish weeding secret. It is not a mysterious liquid, a dangerous homemade chemical, or a guaranteed trick that makes every weed disappear while you sleep. It is a simple system built around timing, dry weather, shallow cultivation, and never allowing young weeds enough time to become established. Used correctly, a garden that looks covered in tiny weeds one afternoon may appear almost clean the following day. The weeds seem to vanish overnight because they were cut while they were still in their weakest stage, then left on the hot, dry surface to wither. But the method only works when you understand exactly when to use it. Hoe too deeply, and you bring buried weed seeds to the surface. Work the soil while it is wet, and many weeds reroot instead of dying. Wait until the weeds are large, and the job becomes far more difficult. In this video, I am showing you the complete old-fashioned weeding system, the tool that makes it work, and the mistakes that can turn a 10-minute task into an entire day of pulling weeds. Stay until the end, because the final step prevents the next wave of weeds before it becomes visible. Before we begin, remember that Amish communities are not all identical, and there is no single secret method used by every Amish gardener. The techniques in this video are traditional hand weeding and shallow cultivation practices used by many experienced farmers and gardeners for generations. Their power comes from consistency, not magic. Now let us get into it. The real secret is timing. Most people weed according to appearance. When the garden looks bad, they begin working. When the soil looks clean, they stop thinking about weeds. That is exactly why the problem keeps returning. Weeds should be controlled according to their growth stage, not according to how untidy the garden looks. The ideal time is when weed seedlings are extremely small. Some may have only 2 tiny leaves. Others may appear as thin green threads across the soil. Gardeners sometimes call this the thread stage because the young roots and stems are so delicate. At this stage, the weeds have very little stored energy. Their roots have not moved deeply into the ground. A shallow hoe passing just beneath the soil surface separates the plant from its roots or exposes the roots to sun and air. On a hot, dry day, the seedlings can wilt within hours. By the following morning, many are difficult to see. That is where the overnight effect comes from. The weeds were not dissolved by a secret mixture. They were attacked at the exact moment they had almost no strength. Compare that with a mature weed. A large weed may have a thick taproot, underground runners, mature seeds, or enough stored energy to regrow after the top is removed. Pulling it disturbs more soil. Chopping it may leave living roots behind. And if it already carries seeds, moving it around the garden can create thousands of future weeds. Timing changes everything. A gardener who spends 10 minutes lightly hoeing every week may do less work than someone who spends 4 hours pulling weeds once a month. Use a shallow hoe, not a deep digging tool. The tool matters. A heavy digging hoe is useful for breaking hard soil, opening planting rows, and removing large established weeds. But it is not always the best choice for routine weed prevention. For tiny seedlings, use a sharp stirrup hoe, collinear hoe, scuffle hoe, or another tool designed to move shallowly beneath the surface. A stirrup hoe has a loop-shaped blade that cuts while moving forward and backward. This allows you to cover ground quickly without lifting and chopping repeatedly. A collinear hoe has a thin, sharp blade designed for slicing weeds close to the surface. The exact tool matters less than the depth. You are not digging the garden. You are shaving the top layer. Move the blade roughly beneath the smallest weeds without turning over large amounts of soil. One of the worst weeding habits is deep cultivation. Most garden soil contains a bank of dormant weed seeds. Some have remained buried for years. As long as they stay deep and receive little light, many remain inactive. Every time you dig deeply or turn the soil, you bring a new group of seeds toward the surface. Light, warmth, air, and moisture wake them up. You remove one generation of weeds and accidentally plant the next. Shallow hoeing attacks the seedlings without disturbing the deeper seed bank. Keep the hoe sharp. A dull blade pushes weeds over instead of slicing them cleanly. Sharpen it regularly with a suitable file or sharpening stone, following the tool manufacturer's guidance. A sharp hoe requires less force, causes less soil disturbance, and reduces strain on your arms and back. You should be able to move through loose soil with a smooth sliding motion. If you are chopping heavily, the weeds may already be too large, or the soil may be too compacted for this method. Choose a hot, dry day. Weather is the second half of the system. Shallow hoeing works best when the surface is dry and several hours of warm weather are expected. After the blade cuts or uproots the seedlings, the sun and moving air finish the job. The exposed roots lose moisture quickly. The tiny plants collapse before they can reconnect with the soil. If you hoe immediately before rain, the result may be very different. Moisture can keep the weeds alive. Some seedlings may settle back against the ground and reroot. Certain weeds are especially good at surviving when left on damp soil. Do not lightly cultivate during a rainstorm and expect overnight results. Wait until the ground is dry enough to crumble. The soil should not stick heavily to your shoes or form wet clumps around the hoe. Morning can be a useful time if the dew has dried and a hot afternoon is coming. The weeds are cut early, then exposed during the warmest hours. In extremely hot climates, work during the cooler morning period to protect yourself. The weeds can remain in the sun even after you go indoors. Wear suitable clothing, drink water, and avoid working through dangerous heat simply because the method benefits from dry weather. You do not need to collect every tiny weed after hoeing. When the seedlings are young, seed-free, and clearly dead, they can dry on the surface and break down. But remove larger weeds with mature seed heads, thick roots, or spreading stems. Some weeds can survive after being cut, especially in moist conditions. Others may continue maturing seeds even after removal. Know what you are dealing with. Create a false seedbed before planting. This is one of the most powerful steps in the entire method. Instead of planting immediately after preparing the bed, prepare the soil first and allow the weeds to germinate. Smooth the surface as though you were ready to sow. Water lightly if conditions are dry or wait for rain. Then leave the bed undisturbed for several days. The weed seeds near the surface interpret the moisture and warmth as their opportunity to grow. A thin green layer begins appearing. Now destroy it with an extremely shallow hoe, rake, flame weeding tool where legal and safe, or another appropriate surface method. Do not dig deeply. You want to kill the germinated weeds without bringing another large group of buried seeds upward. After this first wave is removed, plant your crop with as little soil disturbance as possible. This technique is called a false seedbed or stale seedbed. It allows the weeds to reveal themselves before your vegetables are competing with them. The garden may look empty during the waiting period, but valuable work is happening. You are removing the first major wave of competition before the crop enters the soil. This method is especially useful for slow-germinating vegetables such as carrots and onions. These crops often take time to emerge. Fast-growing weeds can cover the row before the vegetable seedlings become visible. By eliminating a flush of weeds before planting, you give the crop a much cleaner start. The method does not remove every future weed. Seeds can blow in, animals can carry them, and dormant seeds may germinate later. But it reduces the pressure dramatically. The best weeding systems do not depend on one perfect action. They reduce each new wave until the remaining work becomes manageable. Never let weeds produce seeds. There is an old gardening idea that 1 year of weeds can lead to many years of seeds. The exact number of years varies by species and conditions, but the principle is correct. One mature weed may produce hundreds or thousands of seeds. Those seeds do not all germinate at once. Some sprout the following season. Others remain dormant and emerge years later when the soil is disturbed. This is why controlling weeds before flowering is so important. A small weed is one problem. A mature seed-producing weed is an entire future population. Walk through the garden regularly and remove anything beginning to flower. Do not wait until the seed heads look dry. Some seeds can mature after the plant is pulled, especially when they were already well developed. Place seed-bearing weeds into a bag or a managed disposal system. Do not shake them across the bed. Do not throw aggressive seed heads into a cool compost pile unless you know the compost will reach and maintain temperatures capable of destroying them. If you are uncertain, keep them out. Pay special attention to the edges of the garden. A weed growing beside a fence may not be competing directly with your tomatoes, but its seeds can spread throughout the property. The same is true for weeds behind a shed, along a pathway, or beneath fruit trees. You do not need to create a sterile landscape. Wildflowers and native plants can support beneficial insects. But you should know which plants are intentional and which weeds are creating the next invasion. Cover the soil after it is clean. Bare soil does not remain bare for long. Nature fills open space. If you remove weeds and leave exposed soil, new seeds receive sunlight and a place to germinate. Mulch changes those conditions. A layer of straw, shredded leaves, grass clippings used carefully, compost, or another suitable material blocks light and makes it harder for many weed seedlings to emerge. The right mulch also slows water loss and reduces soil temperature during hot weather. But mulch must be used correctly. Do not place a huge wet pile directly against vegetable stems. Constant moisture around the crown can encourage rot and shelter slugs. Keep a small open space around the plant. Avoid using grass clippings that have been treated with persistent herbicides. Those chemicals may damage garden plants and survive composting. Allow fresh clippings to dry slightly and apply them in thin layers. A thick mat of wet grass can become slimy, hot, and airless. Straw works well, but make sure it is relatively free from seeds. Hay usually contains more seed heads and may introduce exactly the weeds you are trying to prevent. Shredded leaves break down gradually and improve the soil. Whole leaves may blow away or form a heavy wet mat, so shredding often produces better results. Mulch depth depends on the material. Too little allows light through. Too much creates pest shelter and may prevent water from reaching the soil evenly. Inspect beneath it occasionally. The goal is to block weeds without creating a hidden home for slugs, rodents, or stem rot. Mulch is not a permanent solution. Organic material decomposes. As it becomes thin, add more. But always inspect the old layer before covering it. Plant crops close enough to shade the ground. Weeds need light. One reason they dominate young gardens is that small vegetable seedlings leave large areas of exposed soil between them. As crops mature and their leaves form a canopy, fewer weed seeds receive enough light to grow. You can use this to your advantage. Follow proper crop spacing, but avoid unnecessarily wide empty gaps. Use block planting, intercropping, and living ground covers where appropriate. For example, tall crops can grow above smaller vegetables. Fast crops such as radishes can occupy space before slower crops become large. Sweet potatoes can cover the soil with vines during hot weather. Lettuce may grow beneath taller plants during cooler parts of the season. This does not mean crowding everything together. Overcrowded vegetables suffer from poor airflow, disease, weak growth, and difficult harvesting. The goal is a planned canopy, not a tangled jungle. Understand the mature size of every crop. Place plants close enough to use the space efficiently while still allowing light, air, and access. Pathways can also be covered. Wood chips, straw, cardboard beneath organic material, or reusable landscape fabric designed for garden paths can reduce weed growth between beds. Be cautious with cardboard around perennial weeds. It may weaken them temporarily, but some roots and shoots can travel beneath it and emerge at the edges. Remove tape, plastic coatings, and labels before using cardboard. Do not use materials contaminated with oil or chemicals. A well-designed garden makes it difficult for weeds to find unused soil. Water the crops, not the entire garden. Every time you water bare soil, you may be watering weed seeds. Overhead sprinklers spread moisture across crops, paths, unused corners, and every gap between rows. That moisture wakes dormant seeds. Drip irrigation and soaker hoses deliver water closer to the crop roots. The vegetables receive what they need, while much of the surrounding soil remains drier. This does not stop every weed. Rain still falls, and roots may spread beyond the irrigation line. But targeted watering can reduce germination in areas where no crops are growing. Check the irrigation system regularly. A leaking connector can create one permanently wet patch filled with weeds. A blocked emitter may leave the vegetable dry, while the nearby soil remains moist. Water deeply enough to reach the roots. Constant shallow watering encourages both crop roots and weed roots to remain near the surface. A deeper, less frequent soak usually supports stronger vegetables and reduces the constantly damp conditions preferred by some weeds. The exact schedule depends on weather, soil, crop, and growth stage. Do not water by calendar alone. Check the soil. Mulch over drip lines helps preserve moisture and hides the wet zone from sunlight. This combination makes the water work for your crop instead of every seed in the bed. Use the 10-minute rule. The traditional method becomes easy when it becomes routine. Do not wait for a free Saturday. Walk through the garden for 10 minutes several times each week. Carry a hoe, small hand tool, or bucket. Slice the tiny weeds you see. Pull anything growing close to a crop stem where the hoe might damage the vegetable. Remove weeds beginning to flower. Check the paths and bed edges. Then stop. Short, frequent sessions prevent the job from becoming overwhelming. You also notice other problems while walking. You may find insect eggs beneath leaves, a leaking hose, ripe vegetables hidden under foliage, or a plant showing early signs of disease. The garden receives regular attention without requiring an entire day. Timing the session after light rain can help when pulling large-rooted weeds because the soil releases them more easily. Timing the session before hot, dry, Weather is better for shallow hoeing tiny seedlings. Use the weather according to the job. For taproot weeds, grasp low and pull steadily. Try to remove as much root as possible. For spreading perennial weeds, avoid chopping roots into many pieces if each fragment can regrow. Some weeds require repeated cutting to exhaust the roots. Others may need careful digging, smothering, solarization, or targeted control appropriate for the species. There is no single tool that defeats every weed. The old system works because it prevents most weeds from reaching the difficult stage. The overnight routine. Here is the complete routine that creates the dramatic result. First, choose a dry morning with warm weather expected. Second, inspect the bed and confirm the weeds are still small. Third, sharpen the hoe. Fourth, slide the blade shallowly beneath the surface. Do not turn the soil deeply. Do not chop around plant roots. Fifth, leave tiny seed-free seedlings exposed on top of the dry soil. Sixth, hand-pull larger weeds, especially those with flowers, seeds, deep taproots, or spreading stems. Seventh, avoid watering the entire bed immediately after cultivation. If the vegetables urgently need water, use drip irrigation or direct the water only toward their root zones. Finally, inspect the bed the following day. Most tiny weeds should be wilted, dried, or nearly invisible. Any survivors can be removed quickly. Then cover open soil with suitable mulch and repeat a shallow inspection before the next wave becomes established. The entire process may take only a few minutes in a small garden. The first session can take longer if the bed is already badly overgrown. But every later session becomes easier. 5 mistakes that make this method fail. The first mistake is waiting too long. A shallow hoe works beautifully on tiny weeds and poorly on a mature plant with a deep root. The second mistake is cultivating wet soil. The cut weeds may survive, and the soil can become compacted or damaged. The third mistake is working too deeply. This exposes fresh weed seeds and disturbs crop roots. The fourth mistake is watering everything immediately afterward. You are helping the uprooted seedlings recover. The fifth mistake is believing the garden is permanently weed-free. New weeds will appear. The system depends on removing each wave early. Consistency is what makes the result seem effortless. A gardener who begins early rarely faces a jungle. Be careful with homemade weed killers. Many old-fashioned videos recommend mixtures containing vinegar, salt, dish soap, or boiling water. These can injure plants, but they are not harmless simply because the ingredients are familiar. Kitchen vinegar may damage young foliage, including the vegetables you want to keep. Stronger horticultural vinegar can cause serious eye and skin injuries and must be handled according to its label. Salt can remain in the soil, damage roots, and make it difficult to grow plants in the treated area. Dish soap is not automatically designed for use on plants and may burn leaves or harm insects. Boiling water can injure roots and the person carrying it. It may be useful in cracks far from desired plants, but pouring it around a vegetable bed is risky. The shallow hoeing method avoids many of these problems. It relies on timing, sunlight, and physical removal rather than adding substances to the soil. For weeds that cannot be controlled this way, identify the species and choose the safest appropriate method. Do not treat every green plant with the same mixture. Final recap. The so-called old Amish weeding secret is not a miracle spray. It is a disciplined system. Attack weeds while they are still tiny. Use a sharp hoe and work only the upper layer of soil. Choose a hot, dry day so the uprooted seedlings quickly lose moisture. Prepare fall seed beds before planting difficult crops. Never allow weeds to mature and scatter seeds. Cover clean soil with safe mulch. Space crops so their leaves eventually shade the ground. Deliver water to crop roots instead of soaking every empty area. And walk through the garden often enough that weeds never become a major project. The reason weeds seem to vanish overnight is simple. You are not fighting them when they are strongest. You are cutting them at the weakest moment of their entire life cycle. No deep roots. No stored energy. No flowers. No seeds. Just a tiny seedling exposed to dry soil and hot sun. That is the difference between endless weeding and manageable weeding. The gardener who waits until the weeds are obvious works for the weeds. The gardener who acts at the thread stage makes the weather do most of the work. So tomorrow morning, look closely at your garden. Do not search only for large weeds. Look for the fine green layer beginning between your crops. Sharpen the hoe, slide it gently across the surface, and leave those seedlings where the sun can reach them. By the next day, the bed may look completely different. If this video saved you from another back-breaking weekend of pulling weeds, hit the like button and share it with a gardener who is tired of fighting the same problem every season. Subscribe for more practical gardening methods that save time, protect the soil, and help you grow more food with less work. And leave a comment telling me which weed causes the biggest problem in your garden. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.